In this video, I'm going to be going over what actions are within Photoshop. I'm also going to go over how to create and set up your own actions, and ultimately how to export and import actions. So first off, what are actions? Actions are essentially shortcuts that you can set up for yourself within Photoshop to help save yourself time in the editing process. Throughout this entire course, we've gone over a wide variety of techniques, many of which require many clicks, menu items, and all sorts of shenanigans within the Photoshop menus in order to even get them set up and ready to use. Actions can take all of these steps and put them into one button. Ultimately, this can save you a ton of time if you're really big into editing. So let's go ahead and hop into Photoshop and let me show you a few examples of some actions. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure your actions panel is set up. All you gotta do is go to Windows and click Actions here. When you first open your Actions panel, you're gonna notice that it's probably empty. That's because all of these buttons right here are actions that I have personally configured based on techniques that I use frequently within Photoshop. So if I click this dust removal action right here, all I gotta do now is start removing dust spots or blotches from the image here. Everything has already been preset up for me. So ultimately, this action saved me 3 clicks. The one click to create a new layer, the second click to rename the layer dust removal, and the third click to select the spot healing tool. And this is just one of the more basic actions that I can set up. Let me show you a more complicated action, for example. So if I wanted to create a vignette, all I have to do now is select the circular marquee tool, make a selection here, and click the vignette button. Now I select the radius, hit enter, and now I have a vignette set up and ready to use. And I could go through and adjust the opacity of this vignette. So that action right there ended up saving me 6 total clicks. The first would be creating the curves adjustment layer, then inverting that layer, then changing the blend mode to multiply, then setting the opacity to a default 50%, renaming the layer to vignette, and then finally applying the Gaussian blur filter manually. Another example of an action you might want to use is the focus stack action. So say I have 2 layers right here that are ready to be focus stacked. All I gotta do is click focus stack, and now it's gonna go ahead and click the auto align button, the auto blend button, and then also rename the layer to focus stack for me. So as you can see, it went ahead and did all of that for me. So those are a few examples of what you can do with this. So now let's get into how to create your own actions. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is go up to this menu button right here and exit out of button mode if this is selected. This right here is all of the individual actions that I have. If you are to click on one, you can see all of the steps that it took to create that action. So now we personally wanna create our own action. So we're gonna go click the menu button and select new action. Now I could go ahead and name that action. So let's name this action dust removal 2, because I'm gonna recreate the dust removal action and show you how it works. So let's go ahead and now click the record button. So now, as you can see, this red button is selected here. And now all I have to go ahead and do is the exact steps that it takes to create a dust removal. So now I would create a new layer, rename it to dust removal 2, and then click the spot healing brush. And then once I'm all done, I click this stop button here. Now, if we go back to button mode and we scroll down here, we can see there's now a dust removal 2 action. So if I delete that and click it, it's now gonna go ahead and do all of those steps that I set up. So now let's go ahead and do an even more complex action. So what happens if we want a menu item to pop up in the middle of the action and prompt the user to enter some kind of data? So we're gonna go ahead and do this with the Orton effect example, which requires two menus to pop up in the middle of the technique. So to start from the top here, we're gonna go to New Action, Orton Effect 2. And I didn't mention that you can also color code any of our actions if that's something you're into. Let's go ahead and hit record here. First thing we're gonna do is select all layers, which is gonna select all of the layers, edit, copy all of the layers, edit, paste all of the layers, and now we want all these to merge into one, the copied. So we're gonna go to layer and merge layers. Now we're gonna rename this to Orton Effect. Then we're gonna go ahead and convert it to a smart object. And now is when we want the menu items to prompt up. If you remember during the Orton effect video, we want the Gaussian blur menu to pop up and the brightness contrast menu to pop up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna click this menu option here and click insert menu item. Now we can go up to the filter, hit blur and click Gaussian blur. It's gonna set it right there and we could hit OK. This is gonna tell Photoshop Actions that it needs to pop up that menu. We're also gonna repeat this process with the brightness contrast adjustment. So insert menu item, image adjustments, brightness contrast, okay. And then we're gonna go ahead and change the opacity to about 15%, which is a solid amount for an Orton effect, and hit stop. And that is the entirety of the Orton effect. So let's go ahead and switch to button mode here. We have the action we just created here, Orton effect 2. So let's go ahead and delete what we just did and click Orton effect 2. Now it's going to go ahead and create that new layer for us where we can enter the radius, which if you remember, you want your radius to be equal to the megapixels on your camera. Hit OK there. Then we're going to be prompted to adjust the brightness contrast, which you generally want high brightness, lower contrast, hit OK. And now we have an Orton effect overlay right here. Turn that on and off. And since it's all been saved into a smart object, we can go ahead and adjust any of those settings later on if we need to. So there we go. We just saved ourselves a ton of clicks with that effect. So now let's go over what happens if you need to edit a certain action. For example, with actions like that Orton effect, that was a ton of steps, so having to redo it every time can be a bit of a pain. So if I want to edit one step in it, all I have to do is go back to the edit mode, and I could go ahead and click any of these steps here. Say for example, I wanted to edit this last step to not be 15%. I could click on this step, hit the delete button, and now I could hit the record button and then simply change the opacity to 10%. Hit enter and then hit stop. And now if I run that effect again, as you can see, the opacity is going to be 10%, and I didn't have to go back and re-record all of those steps again. You can simply edit any of these. So that is how you can edit any of your actions. Now let's talk about how to export your actions. So the first thing you're going to want to do is create a new set right here. Say I want to name this My Actions. Hit enter, and now I have a folder right there. I can now go ahead and drag any of these actions into that folder and close that folder. As you can see, I already have my own personal folder up here called Intricate Actions. Let's go ahead and export My Actions. So you simply click on this and go to Save Actions. That's going to allow you to save all these actions as a .atn file anywhere you want on your computer. You can now give this file to friends, family, or even sell it online if you create a bunch of actions that you think will be valuable to other Photoshop users. Now, if you want to import an action, you simply go up to this menu and hit load actions. And now if you have an actions, you can click it and load it, and it will add all of those actions right into your own personal actions. So fairly easy process. And honestly, if you go ahead and set this up, it can save you a ridiculous amount of time in Photoshop. As you can see, I keep my actions panel right here as a secondary panel to my properties and my luminosity masks because I use it so much. So let's go ahead and skip to the next video.